Hey, hi and welcome.
Thank you
And
very much.
could you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Daniel Roman. I am a social worker out of Bergen County, New Jersey. I am a renter and I identify as queer.
Okay. And could you talk to me about the lack of an LGBT center? Like, what is your experience? What do you see has the impact in Bergen County by not having an LGBT center?
Sure, happily. So because of the type of work that I do, social work, and having interned at a lot of the local service agencies in the area over the last handful of years, I could really say that I have seen the need within this population over the last few years, and I've also seen the effects of this population not being catered directly to. For example, working in a homeless shelter out of Hackensack, we encountered a lot of folks who identified as gay or transgender and felt that they were not necessarily safe in an environment with folks who might not accept them that way and were really either closeted or very nervous the entire time that they were there. It's a very difficult thing, and it's tough to see that in a population that is already vulnerable. But as we know, there is like an inordinate level of homelessness among gay and transgender youth. So it's not exactly a surprise that this was manifesting there while I was there. This type of problem and not catering to this is what results in like a lot of different pockets of this community which should be integrated kind of becoming divided. I've heard a lot of folks in the past as a queer person and having a lot of queer friends in the community, I've heard a lot of folks discuss like the specific challenges that come with substance abuse in certain parts of the queer community and trying to go to Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous or something like that and feeling like their needs were just not necessarily catered to, their experiences just weren't being spoken to or represented there, and yearning and wishing for like a substance abuse program that was specifically for folks within the LGBTQ community so that I could talk about the specific challenges that come in there without feeling like when they were sharing those things in an AA kind of context that they were kind of derailing things from everyone else or really kind of an outlier in that environment, which doesn't necessarily feel good as well. I can also speak for my partner who works in an adult store in the Lodi area. And as a person working for, like in that context, in that community, she serves a lot of folks who are queer or who identify as gay or transgender, or a lot of folks who are simply questioning and they don't really have the answer to what their sexuality is, what their gender is, and they want to explore. And because we don't have a community center to do this right now, a lot of these folks end up in sex shops or adult stores, trying just asking questions of the people behind the counter. Now, I will say, on behalf of my partner, she's a wonderful sex educator and she answers a lot of questions for people who are just trying out cross dressing or just trying to get into, other parts of the community. And, that is a wonderful thing that she's a resource there. But at the same time, she acknowledges that she's not a licensed professional. She's an individual who's working in an adult store in New Jersey. And that really illustrates, I think, the huge gap in need there, because a question that always comes up for her is, where are all these folks coming from? There's an enormous representation of the LGBTQ population in that store, in which almost all the employees are in that community and almost all the clientele are in that community. And yet, in the general population, in terms of like distributing services to other places, there seems to be this gap in terms of like, well, where are they? Like, where are these folks? We're not seeing them come into our centers. The fact is, these folks are all around us, and there is absolutely a need. And I think that if that were perhaps articulated a little better, if that had just been, if a center existed and it was made known to folks within that population, I think that we would see a huge spike in people asking for help in terms of needing these kind of services.
Yeah. And I just want to make a point of what you were saying a little bit clearer early on about the shelter and
Mm-hmm.
having spoken to people that work there. And so I just want to make it clear that, they are doing good work in the sense
Of
like
course.
it's a big problem and they're working through it. So they are a resource. It's just the nature of the beast and it's difficult and it's evolving.
Yeah.
And so it's like I don't want to put it out there like, have people think like, oh, they just don't care. They do care. you know what
Yes,
I mean?
yes.
And it's like, and part of what I and when I say resource center, people think that this resource center is this building that's going to do everything. And that's not what a resource center does.
No, no, it is not. Yes,
And
that's
it's
right.
like, and it will connect with all these people that do it and then advocate and give guidance to these places that are that need a little bit of guidance. They can say, hey, come to us, we'll talk to you. We have this knowledge because everyone comes to us, right? And it can help
Yeah,
with, and then also I can just completely see a great relationship between your girlfriend's shop and this, because if they're doing the work, well, we should support them also, right? And she
I
should get the
agree.
support. And then, if that's where the people are, well, let's educate your staff and make sure they get it. And then also, if we, develop it. So there's a lot, it's complex, is what I'm trying to
It
get
is
at.
complex, and it's a community problem at the end of the day. It really
Yeah.
is a community problem, and it has to be addressed as a community. And definitely to clarify, I like working for that shelter was an honor, and I loved the work that I did, and I loved being able to help people. But that didn't mean that I wasn't aware that there was a level of need that was within the shelter as
Yeah.
well. I think to kind of clarify, like in this profession, we understand on a certain level, that there's, for example, like a specific catering to folks with mental illness. And that makes us aware on a certain level of the unique needs and challenges of individuals who are struggling with mental illness so that we can cater to them more specifically, whether it be depression or anxiety or just any kind of the comorbid things that come along with that.
Yeah.
But as a subsection of that, in a similar way, the identity of an individual, like identifying in the LGBTQ community, also creates a specific set of needs and pressures and societal expectations, the same as an individual with mental illness would have their own unique challenges. And while we may be catering directly to certain parts of the population, there are other things that are simply going missing, and it's not because anybody's doing a bad job. It's just because there's a gap in resources for this specific population. And
Right.
I know that these agencies, they just want to help as many people as well as they possibly can. But in order to do that, sometimes we have to kind of go narrower and narrower and narrower in terms of who are we focusing on, in what population and what are their needs, because I think that that's how you make the real lasting community change.
Yeah. And thank you for making that clearer, because that's, and I mean, because yeah, that's it, you said it perfectly. And part of why I'm doing this, like I was telling you earlier in our earlier conversation, is, we have a portion of the population, like 20 to 40%, that is homeless youth. And, and if you don't catch them there, they keep going down the rabbit hole and develop mental health
Mhm.
issues and develop, records, and then develop addictions. And then talking about addictions, then there's the crystal meth addiction that's going on that no one seems to see or hear or care
Yeah,
about, you know? So, there's,
it's really rough. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like it's easy for, like, I can understand how people are like, "Oh, well, that's just a small portion of the community, and why should we care?" And, just kind of deal with it. So, for example, with crystal meth, right? The problem with that is where people are looking at opioid addictions where they inject, where you have to send out ambulance to revive people several times. That costs money. You
Right.
have people devolving into petty crimes and stuff like that, that cost money.
Yeah.
Hospitalization cost money. Where crystal meth doesn't necessarily go down that route. You won't see it in people going to the ambulance and stuff. You do see some, but as much, right?
Yeah.
But the where you do see the cost to our community is when you have people who are engaging in unprotected sex. And then you have this small
Yeah.
population becoming STIs over and over and over again, not being able to keep themselves safe, and then feeling like they can't go anywhere because it's such a taboo topic. So then all of a sudden you have a population that's going to have an uptick in HIV and AIDS. And then the community is responsible to pay for that person's medicine for the
That's
duration
right.
of their life, which ends up being $1 million per person, you know?
Exactly. And
So
then when
that's
you
where
put
the
it in
cost.
those terms, it's very clear that, there is a financial incentive to doing this kind of thing too. I mean, like you said, with substance abuse, which does happen, also comes like high risk sex work and stuff like that sometimes too, just to make ends meet, and that is a very complicated issue as well, and these are all folks that we need to advocate for. but these unique challenges stem from this kind of overlying umbrella problem, which is there should be some kind of resource for folks within this community, regardless of their, identity, to address that problem so that it doesn't spiral into these other subsets of things. We can understand, as a society on a certain level, addiction and substance use issues, but like the more unique challenges of like where that comes from and addressing that in a different population is something that I think is misunderstood. It is a misunderstood thing. Whereas, I think that like the excessive bar drinker or the person who comes home from work and just gets blackout drunk, like that's something that we have like a little bit more of an understanding for. But a person struggling with their identity or struggling, with a living situation with a parent or a guardian who doesn't accept them for who they are, or an abusive partner, or like I said, high risk sex work, that kind of thing leading to substance use, I feel like is maybe slightly more misunderstood and something that does need to be addressed for what it is.
Yeah. And you know, and that's the whole point of having a resource center is to connect those dots and to
That's
make it
exactly right.
clear because from the outside they're looking at just the at a, like a micro, that one particular person and why should I care, but they're not seeing how it's interrelated to everything else and how that one situation or this small population situation could it really impact the larger community, and
Yeah,
and it's just at the base level. If you have, 5 to 6% of the population, and then it's like close to I don't know, 1 million people in Bergen County. It's like just underneath. It's like 900,000, something like that.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
it's hundreds of thousands of people we're talking
yeah.
about, and it's like, can we afford to have that many people, um, not being as effective as they can be, and not being able as contributing as they can be because they're struggling with basic needs and stuff like that. It just
Exactly,
it's
exactly.
it's a cheap, easy way to help a lot of people, I think.
And I think it's good for it's good on multiple levels. It's good on, like you said, it helps so many people. It's good on a financial level, but it's also just good not just for the community, but even for, like, I would say, the state of New Jersey. Like when we think of pride and like what that means, and in terms of like representing the community, we often think of like New York City or California, specifically like San Francisco, right? Like these things come to mind immediately. Wouldn't it be a wonderful and beautiful thing if we could add New Jersey to this kind of thing and say that we are just as welcoming, we are just as inclusive, and we have that pride as well, and we want people to show it. It's I'm not saying it isn't there, because there are of course community leaders and folks within the community who have been striving to make this, a reality for many many years. But I think that's precisely why they could use the support of folks in these helping professions that are in like a position of whatever power, or you know the service providers, the people who are the administrators of the service providing agencies. Like that would be so huge in terms of changing the culture of what our state is in its reaction to the LGBTQ community. I think that would just be huge.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a really good point because we're getting close to the post-COVID. What I mean? Hopefully, it'll be around the corner.
Surprising, but yes, it's hopefully it's
Hopefully
almost here.
we'll get to a point where we get some kind of semblance of normalcy again. But what we are seeing is lots of people from New York saying, "You know what? I don't want to live in a close, environment anymore. I don't want to go through that again. I'm
Yeah,
moving out." And you have a lot of influx of people going to Bergen County from New York because that's, a lot of the wealthy New Yorkers they want to who aren't Park Ave wealthy, want to have a little bit
yeah,
more, come live in Bergen County and then
yeah,
drive to work or take the bus. That's the way we
exactly.
done it, right?
Yeah,
So they're coming here and the perception always been is like, oh, bridge and tunnel people. It's just like, cringe,
right.
you
Yeah,
know? But
yeah,
they're missing an opportunity. I know places like Hackensack are really trying to redevelop and make it more to attract those people, and this is an
absolutely.
obvious, easy win to do that, you know? It's like,
Yeah,
let's show that you know, we're not.
we're not. Exactly.
You know what I
I
mean?
think so much of it is just raising the awareness that these folks exist, and that the people trying to reach them exist as well. If like both sides could just be made more aware of the fact that there are service providers who would love to be able to cater to this population and to these specific needs. And if like community leaders and leaders within like the LGBTQ community, like community advisors, stuff like that, if they knew that they could trust and collaborate with folks who are in these agencies, I think that there would be a huge sea change in terms of what that means for the LGBTQ community at large, in
Yeah.
New Jersey, in Bergen County. I think that that would be huge. And, it would be good at the end of the day for everybody, like a thriving culture at the end of the day. It is good for everybody, not just financially, but culturally and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. Obviously.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great gay poets, Allen Ginsberg, he went to Montclair University, but we never associate Allen Ginsberg with being like a New Jersey person. I wonder why that is. Like I think that there are so many like rich and wonderful things that this community has to contribute, not just on a purely financial level, but like on an artistic level and like on a cultural level. And why not thrive and let these things, flourish here instead of kind of leaving this population to find it for themselves, to try and, make it work for themselves and try and see if we could do that. I think that it would be such a beautiful thing to support that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think you said it all. I think we said it all.
I like to think so.
I mean, this is what what I'm trying to do is just raise awareness, really,
Yeah.
and and let's have this discussion because at the end of the day, you know, this project is really I just started 2 weeks ago and I'm close to 20 something people. And the
Oh
first
wow.
just thinking about it. And
Yeah.
then on the 16th is when I started doing interviews. And you see me in my bed. I don't look I'm not, like, optically ready for this. I look like a goat half the time. You know? I'm waiting for people to troll me for this, you know? But it's like, I'm not trying very hard, and I have, like, about 70 people just waiting to be interviewed, and I'm going
Gosh.
through them,
Wow.
a lot really quickly. And I'm just thinking that's just me in my little pod. And I'm gonna
Yeah.
start having other people and reaching out to their pod so we can get an accurate picture. And at the end of the day, we're constituents, right?
Yeah.
We have rights and we have expectations and needs. And I think LGBT people are born behind enemy lines. Not saying that heterosexual people are enemies, but we're not born into, LGBT families and cultures, and there's no LGBT nation.
Yeah. Yeah.
It, it's we are born worried and concerned about how they're going to perceive me, and that's being your parent, being your family. And, so when we're adults, we have that in our heads, like we have to be wary of these people. We're just happy that you let us sit at your table.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm trying to wake up my community and saying, no, we pay taxes. We are part of this community. We need a safety net. It's great
Yeah.
that you are comfortable, but that could change really
Of
quick.
course.
You
Of
know what I mean?
course.
And we need safety nets and we need to do better because we're not reaching a lot of people. And I see people like as you who are falling through the nets that can easily just providing a safe space or a little support,
Yeah.
you know?
I mean, that's the reality, is that it does start with conversations precisely like this one, and it just starts with raising that awareness. Not to say that like the LGBT community is like a monolith or anything, but one thing that I've noticed is that many folks in these communities are great networkers because, kind of like what you were saying, they sort of have to be on some level. Where is safe for us? Let me get in touch with other people who know. Can I hang out here? Is this a friendly bar? Is this a friendly establishment to folks like me? Like this is a kind of thing that just kind of occurs very naturally within the community. If we could extend that to community services, like it would just be such a beautiful thing. And I think the growth would be really organic. I mean, you said it yourself with how many people you've reached already, like in this short period of time. I think it demonstrates not only the need, but the fact that this is a very much a doable thing, and
Yeah.
it could, these folks can absolutely be reached because they are there and they are waiting.
Yeah, and the other part of it is there's a lot of good people doing a lot of good work, but they just don't have the understanding. And you remember we worked in our past job, not mentioning where that was, but we
Hmm.
worked, sometimes we'd work with the state and we'll talk about human trafficking and creating programs. And one program was for the LGBT community, and it was
Hmm.
to reach out to them, and it was we're giving you examples and how to um, teach about that example and where look how to see this and find the danger.
Hmm.
And they were saying, an older man is outside and I think the Covenant House or something,
Hmm.
and befriends a younger gay man and offers to take him to the clubs and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
they're framing it as if this is obviously a pedophile or this is someone
Yeah,
actually.
predatory something. Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, you don't have an understanding of the community because when from especially brown and black communities, when you
Yeah.
come out and you are thrown away at the age of 10, 12, and you're out on the streets, you want your family and you create a family and you find older people that will show you the ropes and how to survive.
Yeah.
And when there's a world where you can't work as a transgender, because that's
Hmm.
still pretty much the world, but especially in the 80s and 90s,
For sure, for
you
sure.
know, you have to make do whichever way you can, and often it's illegal.
Yeah.
So, it's like you have people like that man who would have been befriended someone not for sexual purposes, but to help the next generation. And I
Yeah.
think that's so horrible. And it's like, so you have these well-intended people, and they
Yeah.
just don't have the understanding or the components to understand what's going on, and they just insert their reality in there. Um,
Yeah. And I think you're totally right. And I think that a real easy solution to this is to just create some kind of safe space where these folks can exist. And I think it would be easier for these folks who are allies at the end of the day and really do want to help to see this stuff instead of just imagining what it's like in their head and just trying to, do these projections of what it is from, their lived experiences or what they've been taught to really observe, like, through an agency that creates a safe space, all this stuff organically play out, because it will, and it is a shame, like you said, that, when we don't create that space, what happens is these folks are shoved into the margins, and that does often mean illegal stuff. I mean, I come back to the example of my partner working in the adult store, again, not like a community agency that's offering resources. It's a retail shop at the end of the day. But my partner still does think of herself as a sex educator because it's very much an important component of that job. And it's just a shame that she has to be, because that's where folks are coming for advice, are coming to be able to talk to someone who they think understands, because they don't have these other spaces to exist. And why not just, open the figurative shutters and just let the light shine on everybody and just observe, that it doesn't have to be that way. As long as we create a space where people can feel comfortable and safe, it, I think that stuff would go by the wayside a little bit more.
yeah, yeah, and I agree. And let your partner whenever she's off from work, and if she wants to come and talk,
Oh,
please,
definitely.
please, I would love to talk to her.
Oh, absolutely. I will absolutely let her
And
know.
I
I'm sure
really
she would.
want to give her voice, a
Yeah,
platform, you know what I mean?
definitely. Definitely. She's got a lot to say about this type of stuff for sure.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Unless you have something else you want to share, I think we're coming to an end of our
Hmm.
talk.
Well,
And
yeah. I guess I'll just say thank you so much for having me and for listening to what I have to say on this, and I'll emphasize again that, like, as as a social worker, like, I am a person working within the system. So I want to stress again that I believe in that system. I really do, and I'm honored to be able to work as a component within it. But also as a queer person working within that system, I am always just fighting to just make everything more inclusive for everybody. And I think that's what it comes down to at the end of the day, is just raising awareness, promoting inclusivity. And I think the rest will come, because the agencies themselves, like, I've seen the good work that they do. Like, I have seen it firsthand, and it's an amazing and beautiful thing. And I think that all the point that we are making is that more of that work can be done with folks who would greatly benefit from it.
Yeah,
And if we can do that, then why not? Right.
yeah,
I think that's the point at the end of the day.
yeah. And thank you for making that point because I too, this is this I feel this is my uphill battles when I bring this up. They see me as adversarial. You know, it's like I'm not. I believe we have everything that's needed, and I know there are people that are doing the work. A
Yeah.
resource center is just a resource center. They connect the people. That's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to do is connect. So
Exactly.
talk
Exactly.
to me and let's get
Yes.
this sorted out. You know, or
Yeah.
don't talk to me and sort it out yourself, but it needs to be here, you
It
know?
does need to be done 100%. And that's the tough part of advocacy sometimes is that it does come off that way. And, it is a little tough to kind of shake up the status quo. Sometimes it's really hard to make this kind of change. It feels like a very big, substantial thing. And some folks see that as insurmountable, or they think that by doing advocacy work, we are being overtly critical of the established kind of ways of doing things. It's not necessarily that at all. It really is, just as we're saying, just trying to make those connections. Yeah.
All right. Well, do you feel good with everything that you said here? Do you feel confident?
I do. I do. I feel really good about it.
And
And I'm pleased I got to contribute.
and you're aware that the goal is to make this public at some point,
Yeah.
and you're okay
Yeah.
with that.
And I'm totally okay with that. Yeah.
And so I'm just letting you know that any point, if you feel like, hey, I'm not okay with that, just give me some time to take it down, and I'll no questions asked, take it down.
Sure.
Um,
No problem at all.
before I publish it or make it public,
Mhm.
I'll once again show you so you can see like if there's any editing that this is true to what you mean and everything like that. Okay.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much. That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. Yeah.
So I'm gonna end right now.